So to the assignment. So this week's assignment, last week we got started doing some work in Maya, primarily building from Maya in a scene there, and then saving out and then playing in Unity. I showed you a little bit of some prototypes and how we can use sort of prototypes in our levels, but didn't really spend too much time on that. So we're going to flip things around a little bit today, and I'll show you what I mean in a moment. But what I'd like to see from this assignment is basically an understanding of how we use shapes like this in order to guide the player through a space. How do we use positive and negative space to encourage the player, to attract the player to explore an area, to linger, to look around? How can we use the normals of surfaces in order to push and pull the player? Essentially, mindfulness of what I went over in the lecture today. In order to do that, I was thinking, I like this image. I guess this was just me playing around, but basically this idea of sort of slopes and big concrete slabs and stuff like that. So I went and searched around the internet to see if I could find some reference images to sort of start from. And so I'm going to provide these to you. So this this image is from a painter, Jean-Pierre Gart. I'm not sure if I'm getting his name right. He has this amazing series of paintings. It's hard to find exactly what the names of a lot of them are. Pretty much like, it seems like half those paintings are just called landscape. But he uses these really cool like large concrete blocks as stand-ins for environmental objects like canyons, mountains, things like that. But I really like just kind of the simplicity of this. Basically just large concrete slabs, some landscape. Then kept looking. There's a movie or a TV series. I'm not really that familiar with it, but it's called The Maze Runner. I think it's based on a series of books. I know nothing about it, but I found these really cool concept images from Scribble Studios, which I believe is a concept art house, concepting out sort of this movie here. Again, sort of the this sort of green, decrepit, I guess concrete slab sort of stuff, minimalist sort of stuff. We're trying to stay simple right now. So here's going a little more complex, like some greenery and stuff like that. But trying to get, what can we gather from this to sort of inspire us? Concrete slabs falling on their sides, make interesting sort of triangular sort of shapes. Concrete slabs sort of in a series, create a nice like sort of staircase. There's some cool like gear work and stuff like that, but essentially creating landscape out of concrete blocks, that sort of thing. Seems pretty neat. So yeah, essentially, let's see if I can move over to Unity. So like I said, last week we were working in Maya and creating a level, shapes in Maya, saving it out, and then playing it in Unity. This week I've actually created some level prototypes for you. I went ahead and created a landscape, or a terrain sort of piece, just like I described just a moment ago. That's ready to go for you to sort of start working in. And kind of what I'd like to see is basically, so last week we were working directly from a concept art image, basically trying to recreate something that an artist created. And a lot of times working at a studio like at Naughty Dog, you'll have concept artists that their idea is to sort of blue sky what a level area could be to sort of inspire levels. And a lot of times when I see something that really grabs my eye, I'll try to sort of start by just kind of building it directly, kind of like we did for last week's lecture. And once I sort of get a little bit into it, I start to improvise, I start to add, I start to subtract, I start to see what actually works well for my level that I'm going for. And I end up a lot of times with something that doesn't really look like the concept image at all, but that sort of got me going on it. This time, I think what I'd like is basically just to let you sort of paint with shapes here. So what I'd like you to do is sort of take this stuff right here. Don't make the terrain any larger than it is. And essentially the goal of this mini level is for you to play as the cowboy and to find the treasure box. Come on, Unity. There we go. So I want you to put the treasure box somewhere on this terrain and hide it with some of these shapes. So don't use don't use Maya at all. Don't create any new shapes. Just basically use what you have here. You can resize, you can duplicate, you can rotate and translate any way you want, but try to really just use the constraints here. And I find a lot of times putting constraints on creativity is a great way to basically inspire creativity. So anyway, so we're just going to do this as an exercise. So a lot of times when I create levels, in addition to sort of using maybe a few concept art images that someone at my studio created, I also tend to search on Google for just like not stuff to necessarily base my work on, but to sort of gather reference for what the world is going to look like and see if I can just kind of jog some inspiration in my head. To that end, I've actually found that Pinterest is actually really helpful. So this is sort of my personal Pinterest board. I've got two different boards that sort of I often use for creating levels. This one's called just Inspiration, and it's sort of all sorts of, it's all over the map. There's lots of just different things here. Sometimes it's just characters, sometimes it's a cool environment, and it's sometimes more modern things, sometimes it's not. It's just kind of a random assortment of things that just kind of make me want to start creating, to make some cool stuff. So definitely, like, if that sounds appealing to you, I'd suggest trying some sort of thing as well. It's nice to sort of like see this amazing creativity of all these artists sort of help to move creativity through you as well. So that's sort of my inspiration board. And then this is what I call my spaces board. And spaces is more specifically with levels in mind. And here's a bunch of the Jean-Pierre Ugart paintings that I found that I really love. And but the purpose of sort of my space board is to more inspire space itself. So I'll pin here lots of things that sort of like create these just interesting shaped environments that I want to jump into and walk around and explore, and just kind of inspire me to want to move around a space. And that's kind of what I want my levels to do as well, is to sort of invite you to come into them, to explore them, to get to know them. And that's kind of what these spaces is. So a lot of times there's sort of just spaces that just kind of are really interesting looking, some spaces that just kind of break my line of thinking of like how I'm jumbling my spaces together. And yeah, I mean, every once in a while I'll sort of build something more directly related to some of this stuff, but it never really comes across that way eventually when it makes it into the game. But anyway, more specifically for this level, I did go ahead and put together a reference board. So oops, there we go. So essentially, this is kind of like all of the main references that I found that I'm going to be using as I create this level. So, and I encourage you to sort of do the same. It's nice to have sort of one place to go to, this is actually a giant image that I've created, and oops, there we go. That way, all of these images are sort of like at high resolution, but I can sort of kind of pan around and kind of get inspiration as I'm trying to think. So I've put some of the images from my my lecture here to sort of keep me remind me to try to use some of these concepts and stuff as I'm building. I've put all the images that I provide for you. There's a bunch of just random images that I found on the internet that were harder to source and like basically credit. So I didn't want to basically hand those to you, but I think you can go on the internet yourself and find just stuff that might inspire you. So yeah, that's my reference board. So I guess it's time to get started with actually creating this level.